I'm as a person coming from a human rights organization, I of course see these growing difficulties and problems with with our work, and with the shrinking space for civil society, for institutions, for artists, for theaters, that what my colleagues also presented by. But I also would like to say that there are different factors that make our life very, very difficult, and that exist in society in general, and that's what we have to tackle also in our work. And I would say that there is a huge gap between the huge gap and huge misunderstanding and disconnection in society, and there are people who get more and more polarized. And this gap and this way when people cannot actually talk and understand each other was very obvious and visible when Crimea was annexed and when the conflict in Ukraine happened. And we could see then that people became aggressive very quickly, and then they started basically almost kill everyone just because of their belief. And this gap goes not only between between generations, and it doesn't depend on age or on education or on level of your money or your work. So it really the misunderstanding which is growing within all kinds of society. And for example, it is, should we bomb Ukraine or not? Should we bomb Syria or not? Do we support Putin or not? And it's very, very different extremal points of view that exist, and sometimes it's very difficult for people to actually find certain points of dialogue and to understand each other. And I would say that there is also growing frustration within the country, because people see that there is a crisis going on, and it is actually very difficult to ignore it. So we see that there are problems. There are problems in the economy, there are problems in social lives, there are of course problems in civil society, but they are not so seen from the ordinary people point of view, so to say. But we all know that there are ecological catastrophes going on every year. And with this frustration, and especially with this conflict and with this misunderstanding and really lack of trust in society, people have to do something with this growing frustration. And the potential ways out of what they do, one of them, they put all the hopes on the state and think that yes, we are all afraid. We are afraid to take responsibility on us. Please, good state, do something with us. There are people who put on the blame on state. So they say Putin is bad, state is bad. We have to change the regime, and then things will change somehow by itself. But there is also this middle way, which I represent, and which a lot of people also present in our discussion here, they represent. It is about building some alternatives. It is about proposing something else rather than this ambivalent discourse. And it is more about developing institutions and bringing some ideas that it's not only the state who is to be blamed in everything. We also have problems within ourselves, and we also are the people who actually making these things to happen. And of course people are trying to get some secure space, some safety feeling at least in this situation. And unfortunately it happens that more and more people think that you can only be safe if you're doing something together with the state. It's not only about Putin personally, but also it's about him. And I think that really a lot of people are personally in love with him as a human figure, and also as a symbolic figure of somebody who makes it secure for you. So you can trust him and you can put all your energy. And yes, somehow it can be compared to the concentration camp, because in concentration camp, if you know the rules and if you can play them, you actually can survive quite well. And it's in certain way it's a totally safe place where everything is concentrated and where everything is defined. But then you give all your will, all your freedom to somebody else to control you. And that's one of the extreme that we see in society, which exists. And it's not only because people are brainwashed or because they are falling into propaganda. That's really the old ongoing tradition of how people actually survive. Because if we tackle the Soviet history, yes, we do remember that there were huge repressions going on, and people knew that if you're trying to be independent, if you're trying to say something against, if you're trying at least to express yourself somehow, you can be physically damaged. And even if we do not properly study it at schools now, even if we do not discuss it among ourselves, even if there are no proper researches or campaigns against Stalin as a figure and so on. At the same time, I think that this memory is kept within us, and it really influences all the situation we have now, because I see that people more and more try to refrain from responsibility and try to give all the responsibility to somebody else. And that's why it is, to my mind, so important to support people from the bottom, yeah, and to say that they can create safe space by themselves, and that yes, it is risky to be against the government, against the state, and to speak up about human rights violations and something else. And yes, sometimes it can be risky, but at the same time, if you are with a state, it doesn't mean anymore that you are safe. For example, we just recently in Russia we had this case of Komi Republic, where everyone in power from this regional government was arrested. Yes, they were corrupted, but basically the level of corruption is so high that in every region we can say that the government is corrupted, but they just took everyone and put them to prison, and it basically means that there are no rules. It was played in media that yes, we started to fight corruption, but it was wrong, because they just started to fight. It's again the huge corruption game on who owns this particular region, but for media it was played like yes, we put bad oligarchs to prison and we will bring new good oligarchs, so to say. And there are human rights defenders who are actively working in Komi Republic, and they were saying that please do not be happy with this kind of situation. Please do not be happy with this kind of situation, because it actually doesn't mean that something good is happening, because again there are no rules, and this is not a new game, yeah, it's old game, and still rules are broken at the same time. So I would say that if we come to the question of what can be done, yeah, it's very important to somehow show this space of safety and security to everyone. It's very important for us also that we feel safe and we feel supported from our colleagues from other countries and from our also peers and colleagues within Russia. It is, I think it is also very important to support some growing good elements from the state institutions as well, because I believe that there are smart people there who also think that something is going wrong and there are problems in society and that something has to be done. Yeah, and also I think it is very important to demonstrate that yes, state can be a safe space, but actually this state is killing people. It's killing people both within Russia by torture, by anti-terrorism operations that can be really dangerous, but it is also killing people outside of the country, yeah? And we somehow have to understand that we doing nothing actually bring huge harm to people from outside of our country. And then I think it is also important to demonstrate this situation in Russia outside, so people from Sweden, from other European countries, from the United States would understand what is actually going on here, because I know that more and more people became really happy by Putin personally as a very strong political leader, and he is a strong political leader, but at the same time we have to understand that leadership is not everything, and that there are human rights that cannot be neglected in any kind of work. And I would say that also it's very important if we speak about how to work with human rights in Russia. I would say that it's really important now not only to work with Russia and to remember about other countries in post-Soviet space that also face some difficulties, and that also actually the trends that we have in Russia, they are very easily copying in other countries like Belarus, Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan. For example, in Azerbaijan they just put in prison all the human rights defenders, and the situation is actually much worse. So, but at the same time, if we do not make some active steps when something bad is happening in one country, then it's more and more difficult to stop this sprout when it is so spreading over the whole region. And also I think it will be very important to remember that one of the crises that we face, all of us, is not only the crisis of finances or of the military conflict, but it's also the crisis of the growing fundamentalism. People are more and more seeking for this security, but sometimes by security they mean some simple answers. So they say, yes, we do have state, and maybe the answer will be to have different state. Yeah? If we change regime, something changes. Or if we do not like United States, we can bomb Syria and it is our response, which is aggressive, violent, but very simple in a way. Yes, war is always much simpler than peace. Peace is more complicated, is sometimes more unsecure, and people say that, but we cannot think about peace now, it's so difficult, no, let's just bomb. And it's also important to remember that this crisis of fundamentalism is growing not only in Russia but also in Europe. And we see that more and more people became interested in far-right organizations and people who are still against migrants or against some minorities. And it is difficult for all of us, and we all have to think on what can be done. And it's very important that other organizations or other countries or other nations can be seen as a positive example, because it would be very important for us in our work in human rights education in Russia. It would be really important if we can say that, please look at Sweden, they're doing great with refugees or with some other minorities, yeah, or they are supporting somebody very strongly and playing an active role in the international sphere. And yeah, for example, if Europe would deal with the dignity with this refugee crisis, then it would be really great both for you and for us, and then we all can go somewhere. And I would say that discussing all the things that we face in Russia, we also have to remember that it is the world we live in is the world of universal values of human rights, and also universal standards within different international institutions. And I would say that it is really important to also make these institutions stronger, and I would say that it's more important to rather invest more money and energy to European Court of Human Rights to make them more capable of doing with the cases coming from Russia, Ukraine and other post-Soviet space, rather than impose some political sanctions, because we see that political sanctions are no longer working. They didn't actually work with Belarus, they didn't work with Azerbaijan, and yeah, something has to be done, and I think that the stronger we make the international institutions, the better it is, and then it's creating this universality which helps us also to avoid this political language, so to say, and to bring it more to the human rights perspective, to the perspective of values and the common space that we have.